So today we're going to be talking about Vinland Saga Arc 3, known as the Eastern Exploration Arc. This will be my final dedicated arc review video for Vinland Saga. The fourth arc is currently ongoing, but since I've formatted each of these reviews on this channel as arc reviews, I'm going to keep that consistent, and I will continue reading, but I will wait until the arc is complete to do another dedicated video for it. However, I'm so excited for the second season of Vinland Saga to be released as in the anime. We'll be absolutely watching that. I'm happy to make videos on it if that's something that you're interested in, so let me know. And even though I won't be making a dedicated video for the fourth arc until it's complete, Philip and I have been having ongoing book by book in-depth discussions for each book as Philip has been reading through Vinland Saga, and that will continue into the fourth arc as far as it's published by books. So, but I'll also link a playlist if you want to watch through all those. But today we are discussing the third arc in Vinland Saga, and there's a lot to talk about. So this arc begins exactly where we left off, which is back home with his family and Thorfinn being pushed around by his sister to get his hair cut, to get married, to settle down and be a respectable man. And that doesn't coincide with his dreams and ambitions about building a world of peace in Vinland. And so he's trying to get a loan to be able to fund this exploration, the settling of Vinland. And wouldn't you know it, the person to go to for a loan is Halfdan from the first arc. Oh no. So we cut to Halfdan and his son Sigurd, or better known as Siggy, his son Siggy is about to take on a new wife, Gudrid, who isn't pleased. She has different ambitions for her life. Now, I love her character. From her introduction as a little girl to her reintroduction as adult, I felt a little bit of a kinship to her. I too have a passion for adventure and the sea and have always had big ambitions for what I want from my life. And I understand the frustration of being told, no, not that future, or no, that those dreams are too big. This is a more respectable, this is a more reasonable future. Let me give you this category that you can fit inside. And I know that frustration. I feel it in my bones. Plus, I really appreciate in a story that's really focused on chains and feeling shackled to your past or to ideals or standards and fighting for your freedom and fighting for being who you want to be. I appreciate that in this story where these themes have been introduced and explored and re-explored, that he's focusing some time and attention on the realities of the chains that sometimes are put on women, and specifically and very strongly women in this time in history. If you were a man, you'd be able to come. And she just accepts it. She accepts that no matter how badly she wants a different future for her than what's expected of her because she's a woman, that there's not much she can do about it. Even her family tells her, like, just know your place. And she accepts it, and she goes into the future that's expected of her, but she can't fully commit and accidentally stabs her husband. I appreciate that she did give in to what is expected of her, but at the end of the day, she can't stop fighting. She can't give up on her vision for the future that she actually wants for herself. We're going to keep talking about this. There's a lot more that I want to dig into about the way Yukimura handled this topic and how much I think he knocked it out of the park. But I also love that Thorfinn is the one that recognizes her chains, that recognizes her plea for freedom, and is the one that offers it to her, that offers her a different kind of future. Unfortunately, this does look a little bit like kidnapping, which incites the one of the main conflicts, the main conflict of the beginning of the story. And in this initial conflict that he gets with Siggy, where Siggy attacks him and they fight, I don't know, Thorfinn's just come so far, you know? He's changed so much, and he's come so far in this goal of never inciting violence and of trying to talk through things and trying to negotiate and using his ability to fight only for the purposes of defense and disarm, never to actively harm. I think he's doing a great job, and it's been really fun to see this slow evolution of him going from where he was in the first arc to completely rejecting any form of violence whatsoever and kind of figuring out where he's supposed to stand with it all. One thing I really appreciated was seeing that Leif's brother once tried to settle Vinland but met the natives with violence, and so he failed. And then whenever Leif turned to Thorfinn and told him that he's confident that Thorfinn could settle there. What an honor that Leif, the man who knew Thor's the best, well, one of the best, someone who had a very personal relationship with him and knew him very, very well, is able to look at Thorfinn in the eyes and say, you reflect your father. I do believe that you could come in peace and you could actually succeed where others have failed because they approached it with violence and with dominance. So anyway, Thorfinn requests a loan from Halfdan to be able to set out to develop Vinland and create a land of peace. And since he has no money or assets to set up as collateral, Halfdan wants Thorfinn's pride. He wants to shame him, to make him little. And Thorfinn, a changed man, is so relieved that that's all it's going to take. This man has no pride. He's humbled himself to the ground to forsake who he once was and grow anew. And Halfdan immediately retracts that offer when he realizes how quickly Thorfinn would submit. So instead, he gives him a bunch of narwhal horns to go to Greece and grind it up and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter because we don't see it. So Thorfinn and crew set out to Greece to do this mission, but are sidetracked immediately whenever they come across a settlement that has been attacked. And here is where we're going to continue the discussion of how much Yukimura knocked it out of the park in the way he wrote women in this arc and what he wanted to explore here. Because not only does he show Gudrid, who's trying to break through the chains of the expectations of women of that time and her choosing her own future and her own freedom in what is traditionally believed to be a man's job or a man's exploration, I don't know. But he does it in a way that also acknowledges the value, the immense value and strength in that traditional role that women oftentimes fall into. In this settlement that has been attacked, we get introduced to what is probably the most badass panel in the entire arc, and that is of a mother protecting her child. In Yukimura's quest to challenge the roles thrust on men and women, he does not undervalue the incredible role that is being a mother, a woman in that standard role. He doesn't undervalue the other side of it. The fact that this woman is badly injured and clung to her life for the sole purpose of protecting and nourishing her child. And it's not until she found someone that she felt confident would keep her child safe that she finally died. I mean, what an incredibly strong character to cling to life to protect another. What an incredible honoring Yukimura did for that role. And bonus that he also created this incredibly loyal doggo that devoted his life to protecting this child, and when the child was passed on to Thorfinn, that he continued to follow them, and that Thorfinn and the crew honored this dog for all that he's done for them and took him in as part of the family too. I mean, I just love it. It was so wonderful to see Thorfinn take on this child and be the one to say we have to protect him and we have to find a family for him, be the one to change the first diaper, and while everybody was in over their heads and nobody knew how to do this, he was the one that the baby bonded with and that he strapped the baby to his back, and he was the one that could get him to stop crying. And it was so lovely to see Thorfinn in this role. It didn't take over the arc. It only had small snippets, but they were wonderful. wonderful snippets. And this conversation that he had with Gudrid, where he said, Norsemen have an obligation to avenge their slaughtered kin. When he grows older, he'll likely seek vengeance. It's basically an obligation to him. Thorfinn was seeing his own past, and he was afraid of watching that cycle repeat in this child. Like how Gudrid, Gardar from the last arc, like how he was a mirror for what Thorfinn's future would have been if he didn't make a new future for himself, if he wasn't reborn into a new type of person. Just like Gardar was a mirror to Thorfinn's future, Thorfinn was looking at this child and seeing a mirror of his own past reflected in this child's future. And he wanted to protect him from that. And it all works so beautifully in what this arc is exploring and the themes of what Yukimura did here. Now, I really wasn't sold on this plot. I mean, I instantly loved and bonded with Gudrid, and I'm always happy to have more of Thorfinn and Leif, and Bug Eyes is cool too. Basically, almost every character that's newly introduced in this arc, I was 100% on board with. However, the plot, I really wasn't sold on. This plot of, I want to travel for a year to go to a place so that I can gain the resources to go do the thing that's the actual goal. It's not a very interesting plot to me. That didn't really end up being the plot of this story, so that's cool, I guess, but we'll get more into the plot. I definitely wasn't sold on the plot in the beginning. I did end up enjoying the arc far more than I expected when we got that initial setup, but we'll talk more about the plot in general. I have some lines, but what the arc did phenomenally was reinforcing the already established themes and the characters. And one character in particular that encompassed all of that was Hild. Hild is a great representation of showing how that cycle continues. Askeladd and his warriors attacked her village and slaughtered the people. And Thorfinn himself killed her father right in front of her. She was a real-life physical representation of what Thorfinn had already faced in his visions in the previous arc, and he's been reckoning with what he's done and how much pain and harm he's caused. And he continues to face those things head on and own up to what he's done and what he owes to the people that he's harmed. Even when his friends try to defend him and say that he's changed, he's not interested in that way out. He takes responsibility. She's such a strong parallel to Thorfinn, having her father's beliefs instilled in her at a young age, but when she's wronged and her father is stolen from him, she turns to vengeance and seeks it out. Except this time, Thorfinn is the hunted. But after their fight in the woods, where he continues to try to dodge and disarm, as well as protect his friends, Einar steps in and defends him. And her past fathers step in a way that's similar to what Thor's and Askeladd did for Thorfinn in the last arc. Man, it's such an effective deepening of the themes that Yukimura is already discussing, showing how far out this cycle reaches and how deep it affects. So Hild tells him that he's on borrowed time and she's going to be tracking him, she's going to be following him, she's going to be watching him. And the moment that he proves to her that he's all talk, that he hasn't changed, that he's still the man who killed her parents, she's gonna kill him. She's going to get her vengeance. And she acts as a really great continuation of the themes, like I said, but also as a great physical representation of Thorfinn, tracking Thorfinn's progress, showing someone literally having her sights set on him, having him in her crosshairs, and the moment he steps back in this new life that he's pursuing, we will have a physical representation of that failure. He's gonna die. But not only that, she's also a physical representation of what Thorfinn just discussed about this little boy, Carly, I think is his name, when he said that it's a Norseman's obligation to seek vengeance for the people, for his people. She's the representation of that. She's the physical representation of this idea that Yukimura has introduced. Again, a deepening of the themes already established, but also in his quest to explore the roles of women, he has one that wants to break through the chains of the expectations of the roles of women. He is one that embraces the standard role of women and is one of the most incredible characters, despite being a very short-lived character, one of the most strong and brave and powerful characters we get introduced to in the arc, that mother of Carly. But then also we have someone who is showing this ideal, this standard of like a man's role is to vindicate his fallen kin and you know, his quest for vengeance and this manly ideal. And Hild is showing that like she is just as affected by these things, and she's the one that's upholding this, and she's caught up in this cycle, and she's really good. Not to mention, on top of Hild being a phenomenal reflection of the themes, she's really strong on her own as a character. She's so incredibly smart and resourceful, being a prodigy inventor at a young age. She's determined and strong, training with her mentor and building up the strength to be able to hunt bears with him. And she's very emotionally layered as well, as she holds so much pain over losing her father and then her mentor. We really don't explore her personality to an extreme amount in this arc. Really, she is about at the same kind of place as Thorfinn was in the first arc, where we get that kind of one note with hints of a lot more to him, because he's still on his quest for vengeance. The very distinct difference between them being that Thorfinn was willing to do whatever it took to get that vengeance, and Hild's vengeance is very focused on Thorfinn. She's not going to kill a bunch of she's not going to cause that cycle to be extended out to other people. She's just focused on him. That is a very distinct difference in their paths. But even though we don't spend an extreme amount of time really digging into her personality, we are shown plenty to show that she's a plenty layered character on her own. Speaking of characters, you know who I missed in the last arc? Thorkel. Thorkel is having a bit of a rough go in all this piece. He's a warrior through and through, and he is losing it under the order of maintaining peace rather than battle. So in this arc, Thorkel is serving under Canute. Siggy and his merry men have been captured by pirates and sold into slavery, and Thorfinn is trying to accomplish his goals with a crossbow trained at his back. And all of those POVs come crashing together along with Floki, who wants his grandson to inherit the role of chieftain of the Jomsvikings. So he isn't particularly pleased to see Thorfinn a candidate for the throne, despite the fact that Thorfinn doesn't want the throne. This is still a bother to him. So Floki sends some of the Jomsvikings to start burning boats and killing people to try to bring back Thorfinn's head. And of course, Thorfinn defends them using non-lethal fighting to disarm, and 2 men betray the ranks to beg Thorfinn to lead the Jomsvikings. And Thorfinn has come so far. He's changed so much, trying to dismantle who he once was and build up a new self, one that honors his father's teachings and what his father tried to instill in him. But I also love that throughout this arc, we see how incredibly difficult it is for him to be pursuing this new life and these new standards for himself. We see him slip several times and kind of crack a little bit, but never break, which I think is great, because with Kettle, we see that he took on a new self in the last arc. He came to the farm, saw that Kettle wasn't there or was dead, and was like, guess I'm Kettle now. And then he put on this facade as the farmhand, the one in charge, the one that is kind and good to his slaves. And with just a little bit of pressure, it was a lot of pressure, when pressure came, he crumbled, he cracked, he broke, he changed. With Thorfinn, he's met with pressure around every corner throughout this arc, being directly challenged by people in the internal sense, as well as physically being challenged. And we see the cracks. We see him really start to feel the pressure of how incredibly difficult it is to rebuild a new identity, but he never breaks like Kettle did. He stays strong to who he has chosen to be. And the first crack that we see is here. Everyone's asking so much of him. Everyone is committing violence to try to bend him to their will. And he's meeting conflicts around every corner, and seeing him lose it for a second is really important for his character. But then a child shows up and Thorfinn is kind to him, but his mother is afraid of him. And these men try to convince him that his true nature is that of a warrior. His true nature is that of what they want from him. And he meets these conflicts where people tell him, no, this is who you are. Despite the fact that he has his found family, he has Einar telling him, regardless of what people ask of you, regardless of what people think of you, I know who you are. I will always know the true you. Despite having that support backing him up, he's still constantly getting people trying to manipulate him, trying to ask more of him, trying to get him to be the one that solves every problem. And then the pressure weighs on him, man. So anyway, Thorfinn and Hild are saving some girls that were being held captive by the Joms Vikings, and Thorkel is off to start a war. And mini Thorkel, Garm, wants to fight Thorfinn because he's looking for someone good enough to kill him. Now, I have mixed feelings about Garm. One of my patrons mentioned that he feels too much like a shonen character and like he doesn't fit in the arc. And man, I couldn't get that out of my head. He really does have a shonen design. I see it. I see it. I do think that his personality fits with the story and with the themes that Yukimura is exploring in the story. So I think as a character, he does fit, but I do have mixed feelings about him. But he does feel like a character that's completely constructed to be a physical challenge to Thorfinn's ideals. We have the mental challenges, like those warriors that were telling Thorfinn, you will always be a wolf. It's in your nature. You can try to live among the sheep, but you will not. We will fail. But then you also have the physical confrontations of someone actively pursuing him in battle, and he can't be talked out of it. He can't be reasoned with. He can't, like with Canute in the last arc, you can't just have a conversation, have an understanding, and part ways. Sometimes someone just wants to kill you, and that's that. So what do you do in that circumstance? And he does feel like a character that's constructed just for Thorfinn to have that challenge. But his personality is fun, and his fighting style is really cool, and basically every scene he was in was really fun. So yeah, I guess I kind of feel the authorial hand on Garm a lot more. Like for instance, the other character that I already brought up in this arc, the one, what was his name? Gardar, Arnhide's husband, who came into the last arc just to be a confrontation and a mirror to the path that Thorfinn was on and then die. He is a character that was constructed for the themes, but he flowed so seamlessly into the story that it was brilliant. It was one of my favorite parts of the entire arc. He was one of my favorite parts of the entire arc. And Garm, I don't feel that way about. He feels a little bit, I feel Yukimura's hand on constructing him and inserting him in places far more. But I never didn't have fun when he was around. I always had fun with him. He was a blast of a character to interact with. So I don't know. I hope we get more of him in the future and we deepen his character a little bit. That'd be great. And I do love how Yukimura would cut back and forth between Garm and Thorkel. These two characters both displaying that lust for battle and for a worthy opponent. Plus the element of Garm taking the head of the leader, which was what Thorkel wanted. So the plot lines of these two characters start crossing before they eventually spar, which I really enjoyed. And I do think that in this fight, which we'll talk more about in a little bit, I do think that in this spar, Thorkel would have won. I just think Garm is obviously very skilled, he's obviously very powerful, but I think Thorkel had that battle. What do you think? Who do you think would have won that one? I'm Team Thorkel. Anyway, so Garm kidnaps some of Thorfinn's crew to goad him into a fight, but Floki's grandson, Baldar, sets them free. Baldar is an interesting character because he too is imprisoned by the role set before him by his blood. He serves as a really good parallel to Gudrid, and they even have that connection where Gudrid offers for him to join their group after he showed them how to escape through the well. And while he didn't get to go with the group like they had intended and like he wanted, he did still get his freedom, and in fact the freedom that he initially was looking for, which was to just be able to be a kid who got to live life with his grandpa. But before we get to that ending with him and his grandpa, we have to set Thorkel on fire. So the battle rages on as the crew tries to escape. Leif gets shot with arrows and Siggy saves him. Then Siggy is tasked with the goal of opening the gates to let the enemy in, and Thorfinn is tasked with rescuing Gudrid. And as he rescues her, he's faced with his father's killer, the greatest physical and mental monumental confrontation in this new way of life. When you're face to face with the man who ordered your father's death, do you follow the ways of a Norseman and avenge him, or do you follow the ways of your father? And even though he nearly gave in to his rage, he broke his sword and left his father's killer behind. So everyone is trapped. They decide to keep Balder as a fake hostage with the intent to take him with them once they escape. But Garm shows up to give Thorfinn one more physical challenge to his beliefs. And I've talked about this a couple times, and I really love how manga does this in general, but I am talking about Yukimura and this arc. So I love how he runs these scenes parallel here. We have a fight happening where people are living for the thrill of battle, and at the same time, we watch a man die and realize that there is no glorious end in this battle, and begging his comrades to stop fighting, trying to warn them, but they can't hear him, embodying those themes from the last arc. And at the same time, we're cutting to Thorfinn choosing not to fight against Garm, not to choose this way of life. And how satisfying was it to see him use the very skills that Askeladd tried to teach him over and over again to disengage Garm. It's really cool to see Thorfinn pick up the philosophies that Thor's taught him, and at the same time use the skills that Askeladd taught him. I'm loving the way he's handling this. I'm also really curious what we're gonna do with Garm in the future, because Garm told him, we're gonna meet again, we're gonna fight again, that time I'm gonna win. And Thorfinn said, I would prefer if the next time we meet as friends. And Garm said, what are you talking about? We are friends, because in his mind, this is what friendship is, I guess. And I'm really curious what we're gonna do with his character, because like I said, while he's a fun character, and I never didn't have fun when he was on page, he does feel like he was constructed just to be a physical confrontation to the ideals that Thorfinn has picked up and adopted. And I wonder what we're gonna do with him. So Thorfinn steps up to take the role of commander of the Jom's Vikings, and with Thorkel's help, he dismantles the group. And because he used Thorkel's help, Thorfinn now owes him a fight. And Thorkel is such an interesting character to me. He challenges Thorfinn's dream and says that no matter where you settle, men will fight, which is valid. That's a valid point, that just because you get away from this war and you find a place that isn't currently warring and create a settlement there, that doesn't mean that war will never occur. Where you have humanity, you will have conflict. And he's excited to finally be able to fight Thorfinn again, and he's owed this fight. But when he sees that Gudrid loves him, he postpones it. He's a character that looks so one-dimensional in so many scenes, but Yukimura constantly does things like this that remind us that he's intelligent, he's thoughtful, he's aware of what's going on around him, and he responds accordingly. Now let's talk about Siggy, because I've kind of skirted around discussing him, and he deserves a dedicated piece of this video because I love his character. He starts off as this entitled child who I guess is kind of the product of the way he was raised. But I love his dynamic with his crew, how he feels like he's this grown, strong man, and they constantly remind him, no, we're just here because we're your friends and we love you. And his merry men know who he really is, and they're the reasons for his change of character. Siggy is willing to sacrifice himself and die for others. And when Gudrid gets him out of that situation and he survives, he sacrifices his future and honor to give her the future that she wants. We even get a sweet ending with him and his family, which reveals some heart in Halfdan, and he ends up with his very scary wife who loves him. He's a character that I found really funny. I loved his dynamic of like thinking that he was some great warrior and his men just being like, okay, buddy. I thought that he was funny. I didn't really care for his role as just this guy who pursues them and then almost catches up and then fails and then pursues them, and, you know, just like this ongoing bit. But the way his character and their arcs all came together at the end, how much he grew and changed, I really, really loved him. And we get to end this arc once again with Thorfinn coming home. Ylva, his sister, who heard that Thorfinn kidnapped Halfdan's future sister-in-law, has been waiting all this time for this battle. She's been waiting for Halfdan to come and punish them for what her brother did, and for her to have to defend her family. And Ylva is a character that I love so much. She's so strong, and I appreciate every time I get to hang out with her. But we get to end this arc with a full circle back to that initial conversation where she told him, get a wife, settle down, be a respectable man, and he returns with his wife. He returns with a wife and child that they've adopted together. And I don't know, I love this ending of two people who were once chained that chose a life for themselves and gained their freedom, now building a new life together. I really enjoyed this arc. I did enjoy it less than the first two arcs. It is underneath those guys, but not by a lot. The thing is, the first two arcs to me are perfect. I mean, there's so little that I would change about them. They are S-tier arcs. And so it's kind of hard to maintain that momentum. And so this one that feels like a slight step down, I still enjoyed so much. I think my big problem with this, my big whine about this arc is the plotting. I already said it before, but the initial plot idea of travel to go to a place to get the resources to go do a thing isn't interesting. And then the fact that we had the time skip and we never even saw them get to Greece, which is like just a weird choice. But then we also had several instances where I really just felt Yukimura's authorial hand, where things didn't feel smooth and natural. They felt like Yukimura wanted to do something, and so he created something to do that thing. I already talked about Garm. Garm is a character that feels constructed for the purposes of the plot rather than just a really natural addition to the story, which again, I think all throughout this series, Yukimura is more concerned with discussing things than he is with anything else. And there are characters like what is his Arnheid's husband from the last arc that, yeah, he totally was there for the themes of the plot, but he felt so seamless to the plot. He flowed in and out of it perfectly. And I don't feel that way about Garm, but there are other things that I could bring up that did this too. Another easy example I could give is Ymar, I don't know how to say his name, the werewolf guy that just like appeared out of thin air. He wasn't a part of this war. He should have been mentioned before this chapter. I mean, if we're in a freaking battle and you have Thorkel in the battle, you're gonna save your werewolf for later? You're just gonna wait until Thorkel is mad and ready to kill Dicehead. What's his name? Floki. You're gonna wait until Thorkel is ready to kill Floki, and then it's like, oh, how do we get out of this? There was a werewolf in the room the whole time. Get him, Thorkel. And then like Thorkel's energy is dedicated to that, and then he's fine, and then Floki gets to live on. Like, it just is, like, there were just things in this arc that felt like I need something to happen, so I'll make something happen, instead of feeling like the perfect flow that the first two arcs felt like. And this isn't me I'm not trying to just like be really nitpicky. It's just, this arc was phenomenal, but the plotting, I feel, was rough around the edges in certain places. It was still a great arc, but you know, whatever. That's how I think. I actually would have, I feel like that whole issue with the werewolf could have, why didn't we just have Garm and Thorkel's battle? Why didn't we just have that happen at this point? You know? Like, Garm could have come away from Thorfinn's fight and still been itching for a fight because he was dissatisfied with the way that one ended. And I don't know, he found his spear or he picked up a different spear. And then he sees Thorkel, and then they fight at that point. And then we wouldn't have to just like create a werewolf out. I know he's not a werewolf. I know he's not, but he looks like one. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Whatever. I'll stop fixating. The point is, this was a great arc. This was a killer arc. This was amazing for characters, established characters getting even more amazing time and character depth. I really wish we had done more with Einar. He had some amazing scenes, but I would have appreciated more from him in this arc. But we got more from Thorkel. We got amazing progress with Thorfinn and getting to really see the cracks in this new life he's trying to build, just like we saw with Kettle, except Kettle broke and Thorfinn didn't. Thorfinn remained strong and stood by what he believed. loved it. We got new characters, Gudrid, Hild, who I loved, Carly, the baby boy. I loved these new characters, and Garm, who I have mixed feelings about, but generally I enjoyed him. And this story is so theme heavy, and I think that Yukimura did a phenomenal job of deepening established themes and introducing new themes and knocking it out of the park. I don't know, I liked this arc. It is, for me, a step down from the first two, but not by that much. Anyway, like I said at the beginning of the video, I will continue reading. I am going to finish this volume that I'm currently on, as well as move on to volume 13 when that is published. I think it's December 20th it's supposed to be published. I will be reading that as well, and continuing to discuss each of these things with Philip on my second channel. Again, all that is linked in the description if you want to check it out. But let me know what you thought. Did you like this arc? Why? Why not? Who is your favorite character in it? I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on this channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays on the second channel, which again is linked in the description. I'll see you again soon. Bye.